What does it take to build a life so complete, so varied, so genuinely remarkable in every dimension that 300 years after you were born, people are still reading about you, still learning from you, still trying to understand how one human being managed to do so much with the single lifetime they were given? What does it take to be simultaneously the most famous scientist in the world, the most skilled diplomat of your era, one of the founding architects of the most influential democracy in human history, and to have started with nothing? No family name, no inherited wealth, no university education, no connections, no advantages of any kind, except a mind that refused to stop working and a character that refused to stop improving. Welcome to Book Essence, where we unlock the essence of every book so you get the wisdom without spending weeks reading. Today, we are breaking down Benjamin Franklin, An American Life by Walter Isaacson, the definitive biography of the most pragmatic, most versatile, and perhaps most genuinely useful human being the American story has ever produced. Let us unlock it. To understand Benjamin Franklin, you have to begin where Isaacson begins, not with the kite and the lightning bolt, not with the Declaration of Independence, not with the magnificent final chapter of a life that reshaped the world. You have to begin with a boy in Boston, the 15th child of a candle and soap maker, who received 2 years of formal schooling before his family ran out of money to pay for more. 2 years, that is the entirety of Benjamin Franklin's formal education, and yet, by the time he died at 84, he had received honorary degrees from Harvard, Yale, Oxford, and St. Andrews. He had been elected to the Royal Society of London. He had been celebrated across Europe as the greatest scientist of his age. How does a boy with 2 years of schooling become the most educated man in any room he enters? The answer, which runs through every chapter of Isaacson's biography, is both simple and demanding. He educated himself, relentlessly, systematically, and with a discipline so consistent that it eventually produced results indistinguishable from genius, though Franklin himself would have rejected that word. He did not believe in genius. He believed in effort, in practice, in the deliberate, patient, daily work of becoming slightly better at whatever mattered most. He read everything he could find. He wrote constantly, copying the style of writers he admired, then trying to improve on them. He taught himself mathematics, navigation, grammar, logic, several foreign languages, not in classrooms, but through books, through conversation, through practice. And he did all of this while working as a printer's apprentice, then as a printer himself, building the financial foundation that would eventually free him to pursue the things that interested him most. One of the most famous passages in all of Franklin's writing, and one of the most practically instructive, is his account of what he called his project for moral perfection. At the age of 20, Franklin decided to become a better person, not vaguely, not generally, not through the kind of aspiration that produces no change because it produces no method, but specifically, systematically, with a precision that reflected his fundamental conviction that character, like any other skill, could be developed through deliberate practice. He identified 13 virtues that he believed were essential to the kind of person he wanted to become: temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity, humility. And then he built a system. He created a small notebook with a page for each virtue and a grid for each week. Each day, he would track his performance against each virtue, marking with a dot every failure, every instance in which he fell short of the standard he had set for himself. He focused on one virtue per week, giving it concentrated attention, before cycling through the rest. His goal was not to eliminate failure entirely. He was too pragmatic for that. His goal was to reduce it week by week, month by month, until the virtues he was tracking gradually became habits he no longer needed to track. He never achieved perfection. He was honest about that, with characteristic humor, noting that he was particularly bad at order and that he eventually stopped trying quite so hard at humility because he was becoming too proud of his progress in that particular virtue. But the project, imperfect as its results were, produced something that no amount of vague aspiration could have produced. A Franklin who was measurably, genuinely, substantially better than the Franklin who began it. The dimension of Franklin's life that most surprises modern readers who know him primarily as a founding father and a statesman is the depth and originality of his scientific work. Franklin was not a hobbyist. He was not a gentleman amateur with a passing interest in natural philosophy. He was a genuine scientist, one of the most important of the 18th century, whose experiments with electricity produced insights that are still taught in physics classrooms today. The kite experiment, the famous demonstration that lightning is electrical in nature, was not a stunt. It was a carefully designed experiment, preceded by years of methodical research that answered a question no one had previously been able to answer, and that had enormous practical consequences. Because once Franklin understood that lightning was electrical, he immediately asked the question that distinguished him from every other scientist of his era. Not just, what is this, but what can we do with this? The lightning rod, one of the most immediately useful inventions in the history of human civilization, followed directly from the theoretical insight. Buildings that would previously have burned, ships that would previously have been destroyed, lives that would previously have been lost, saved by the practical application of a theoretical understanding of the nature of electricity. This was Franklin's genius, if he had one. Not pure theory, not pure practice, but the refusal to separate them, the insistence that understanding without application is incomplete, and that the test of genuine knowledge is what you can do with it. The chapter of Franklin's life that Isaacson argues was his greatest achievement and that most transformed the course of human history was his decade in France as America's representative during the Revolutionary War. Franklin arrived in Paris in 1778 at the age of 70 as the representative of a nation that did not yet fully exist, fighting a war it had not yet won against the most powerful military force in the world. His mission was simple in statement and almost impossibly difficult in execution. Convince France to support America, to commit money, ships, soldiers to a revolution whose outcome was by no means certain, and whose success or failure would determine the entire future of the democratic experiment. What Franklin brought to this mission was not military force, not financial leverage, not any of the conventional instruments of diplomatic power. He brought something rarer and ultimately more powerful: his reputation. In France, Franklin was not a diplomat. He was a celebrity, the greatest scientist in the world, the man who had tamed lightning, the embodiment of the Enlightenment ideal, the self-made philosopher who had risen through merit rather than birth to the highest levels of achievement and recognition. The French, who were deeply invested in Enlightenment ideals and deeply frustrated with their own aristocratic system, were captivated by him, and Franklin, who understood people with the same precision he brought to understanding electricity, used that captivation with extraordinary skill. He cultivated relationships, he charmed, flattered, listened, and waited with a patience that most younger diplomats could not have sustained, and eventually, he secured the French alliance that made American independence possible. Without Franklin in Paris, Isaacson argues, there may have been no United States. One of the qualities that makes Franklin both admirable and occasionally frustrating to biographers and to readers is his fundamental, almost constitutional pragmatism. Franklin was not an idealist. He was not driven by grand visions of how the world should be, by utopian blueprints or revolutionary theories or passionate commitments to principle regardless of practical consequence. He was driven by what worked, by what actually produced results in the real world, for real people, under the actual conditions that existed. This pragmatism served him extraordinarily well in diplomacy, where the gap between the ideal outcome and the achievable outcome is almost always enormous, and where the person who insists on the ideal often ends up with nothing at all. It served him well in science, where theory that cannot be tested is merely speculation, and where the most important measure of understanding is what you can do with it. But it also produced real limitations. Franklin's pragmatism, his willingness to compromise, to defer, to accept the achievable over the ideal, led him to positions on slavery that are deeply uncomfortable by any standard. He owned slaves for much of his life. He did not confront the institution directly until the very end, becoming president of an abolition society in his final years. Isaacson examines this honestly, as he examines every difficult dimension of his subject's life, without excusing it, without minimizing it, and without allowing it to obliterate the genuine magnitude of everything else Franklin achieved. Both things are true, and the honest biographer lets both things stand. Benjamin Franklin died in 1790 at the age of 84 in Philadelphia, in the city he had helped build, in the country he had helped found, surrounded by the evidence of a life that had been, by almost any measure, the most productive a single human being had ever lived. He had built a printing empire from nothing. He had founded institutions, a library, a fire department, a hospital, a university that still exist today. He had discovered fundamental truths about the nature of electricity. He had helped write the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. He had secured the alliance that made American independence possible. He had invented bifocals, the lightning rod, the Franklin stove. And he had done all of this, not through genius alone, not through privilege or connection, but through the sustained application of a set of principles so practical, so clear, and so consistently applied that they produced results that looked like genius to everyone who observed them from outside. Isaacson's final assessment of Franklin is both celebratory and instructive. He argues that Franklin is the most American of the founding fathers, not because he was the most brilliant, or the most principled, or the most noble, but because he embodied the quality that the American story, at its best, has always celebrated: the conviction that what you are born with is less important than what you do with it, that character can be built, that knowledge can be acquired, that the distance between where you start and where you end is determined primarily by the quality of your effort and the consistency of your character. Franklin started with nothing. He built everything, and he did it one day, one virtue, one experiment, one relationship, one improvement at a time. Let us bring together the greatest lessons from Benjamin Franklin and American Life by Walter Isaacson. 1. Self-education is the most powerful education. Franklin received 2 years of formal schooling and became the most learned person in any room he entered through decades of deliberate, systematic, self-directed learning. The institution matters less than the intention. 2. Character can be built systematically. The Virtues Project is not a historical curiosity. It is a method, specific, practical, and repeatable, for becoming measurably better at the things that matter most. 3. Theory without application is incomplete. Franklin's greatest contributions, from the lightning rod to the Constitution, came from refusing to separate understanding and usefulness. Knowledge is most powerful when it changes something in the world. 4. Reputation is the most powerful diplomatic tool. Franklin's decade in France demonstrated that genuine respect, earned through a lifetime of genuine achievement, is more persuasive than any argument. 5. Pragmatism has limits. Franklin's greatest flaw, the accommodation of slavery, is a permanent reminder that the person who always accepts the achievable over the ideal sometimes accepts things that should never have been accepted. 6. What you are born with matters less than what you do with it. This is Franklin's deepest lesson and his most enduring gift to everyone who comes after him. Walter Isaacson closes this biography with a thought that Franklin himself would have recognized and approved. He was not a saint. He was not a genius in the conventional sense. He was a man who decided, early, clearly, and permanently, to apply the full force of his attention, his discipline, and his genuine curiosity to becoming as useful as possible, to the people around him, to the institutions he served, to the country he helped build, and to the future he knew he would not live to see. That decision, made in Boston by a 15-year-old with no advantages and no guarantees, changed the world. That is the essence of Benjamin Franklin and American life, and that is what we do here at Book Essence. We take the world's most powerful books and unlock their wisdom so you can build something real, starting from exactly where you are. If this video brought you value, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that where you start is not where you have to finish. Every week on Book Essence, a new book, a new lesson, a new chance to grow. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and keep unlocking your essence. See you in the next one.